We're in the second week of a message series called The Better Way. And what we're doing over these 5 weeks, we're looking at the teachings of Jesus and recognizing that Jesus offers us the better way of life. He offers us a way of hope, a way of peace, a way of joy, a way to see life differently than the rest of the world around us sees it. Now, as I was thinking this week and preparing for the message, in particular, there's something that came to mind. So I've been on a journey the last few months trying to learn how to surf, and it's not gone very well for me. So I go to the beach and I go out there for like an hour in the ocean, try to stay afloat, try not to drown, and try to get up on a surfboard. And unsuccessfully, I've been out there multiple times. But this weekend, I went out with Pastor David Stone, our worship pastor here at Lake Forest. He used to be a surfing instructor, and he was able to get me up on the board. And isn't that awesome? I'm just so thankful. I just needed somebody to show me the way. Also, this week, I was playing pickleball. So I play pickleball. If you don't know what pickleball is, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. No doubt in 2028, it will be in the Olympics in LA. I'm saying it prophetically. And my son would love to be on that team. So we play pickleball together. He always beats me, by the way, my oldest. And yesterday, he said, "Hey, Dad, your serve is so bad. Like every time you serve, it's going left, it's going right, you can't get it. Let's watch a YouTube video together." So we watched a YouTube video. It's like a 3-minute video. And would you know, the next game, I smoked him. I beat him 11-0. I skunked him. So thank God. All I needed was somebody to show me the way. And isn't that true in life? Sometimes what we need, the difference between where we are and where we want to go, is someone showing us the way. Nobody understands life. Nobody understands the human condition. Nobody understands your soul more than Jesus. In fact, the Creator made you so that you would know His heart. And when He stepped into time, when He became a human, when God lived among us, He showed us the way to a different kind of life. Now, when Jesus would teach us about a better way of life, a better way of relating to people, a better way of finances, a better way of thinking, a better way of our heart's condition, dealing with the stuff on the inside, Jesus would show us the better way. And unlike surfing or pickleball, Jesus' way actually deals with what's on the inside, the heart. I don't need my heart to be changed to get better at pickleball. But to live the ways of Jesus, we need a heart shift. And we're going to look today at a very challenging heart shift that He gives to us. But I want to start in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. These are the theme verses for our whole series. Jesus is speaking in the Sermon on the Mount, and you'll see these in your notes if you want to pull them out. Matthew 7:13, Jesus says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So Jesus gives us two options in life. He says one road is paved and it heads towards death. It is a road to destruction. There are a lot of people on it. And there's another road that I'm coming, He's saying, to give to you. It's a way of life. It's a way of blessing. It's God's intention towards you. And Jesus came to show us how to live that way. In fact, in John chapter 14, He would say this, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me." So if we want to know the better way, we look to the life of Jesus. We look to His teachings, and we see how God designed for life to work. Now, today's message, if I told you the subject, you would probably say, yeah, I've heard a lot of messages on that, or I don't like that word, the way of service. And if I use that word, perhaps there's some negative connotations that come to mind. But I would also say another way to think about the message today is the way or the path to greatness. And deep within inside of all of us, there's a desire to live a great life. I was watching the Olympics this weekend, and I was watching diving, and somebody went off the board, and they're like, "That was the perfect dive. It was so great. It was like 100 points out of 100. It was like 99.9. And what I thought in that moment is there's a longing inside of us, from diving to sports to marriage to finances to relationships to our careers. There's a longing inside of us to live a life that is marked with greatness. But so often, we don't understand greatness from God's point of view. So today, as we look at the subject of service, we're going to see God's vantage point on greatness. If you want to have a great marriage, these words matter. If you want to have a great relationship with your kids, what Jesus says in this passage today will change your life. If you want to have a great business, if you want to have great friendships, all of what we're going to look at today has the power to change your life. Matthew chapter 20, Jesus is with his disciples and he's headed up to Jerusalem. And we're going to see today a distinction between the story, if you were here last week, that we looked at, where Jesus, he speaks to his disciples in the context of a desperate father trying to get healing for his children. Today we're going to see a mother who comes to Jesus with a request. But before we get there, we notice in the story, Jesus is headed up to Jerusalem. In verse 17 of Matthew, it says, "Now as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside and said to them, 'We're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed. He will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will turn him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life.'" Now, if you're not awake, now's the time to wake up. It's like all kinds of gory stuff Jesus is talking about: crucifixion, death, flogging. And it would have been surprising for his followers in that moment as they're heading up to Jerusalem. They're doing this ascent that would be done multiple times throughout the course of the year. There would be songs written called the Psalms or Songs of Ascent that the Israelites would sing as they went to Jerusalem. So Jesus is ascending into the holy city with his disciples, and he wants them to know this time, this moment is different. This time we go into the holy city, this is the moment where it's all going to culminate. And the culmination is going to be me, Jesus is saying, going to a cross, hanging there, paying the price for the sins of the world, ultimately so that we as humans could be forgiven from our sins. And Jesus is in this conversation with his disciples, headed towards to Jerusalem, and on his mind is the suffering that is in front of him. And I want you to notice, that's the context of the request that we're going to see in this moment. Verse 20, it says, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and knelt down and asked a favor of Jesus." So she's going to ask a very specific request for her two sons, James and John. This is the request. Jesus says to her, "What is it that you want?" he asked. And she said this, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine might sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." Now, if you are looking at this request thinking it's a little bit odd, it's odd. It's poor timing, Mom. Like, this is not the moment to ask Jesus for the thrones on your right and your left. Now, Jesus has one thing on his mind, and the thing on his mind is his crucifixion, his resurrection, the salvation that he's going to bring to the world. Yet these disciples are so confused as to what the Messiah was trying to accomplish. In their mind, they already are believing that Jesus is the Messiah, but their understanding of the Messiah is that he would be a political leader that would liberate them from the power of the Roman Empire. And so here these disciples and their mom, and you got to ask the question, did they put mom up to this? Which I kind of think that they did. And they come and they want the throne on the right and on the left. They want the power positions in the kingdom when Jesus becomes the ruler. The thing on their mind is ultimately their prominence. And whenever Jesus says to the mother, "What is it that you want?" I want to come back to that verse for just a moment. What is it that you want? The request that we make of God reveals to us what is on the inside of our hearts. I want to say this again. The request that we make to God reveals or shows us what's on the inside. So last week, the story we looked at, a father who comes in desperation. Now we look at a parent that comes in manipulation. And isn't it true so often in our understanding of God, we come in manipulation to God. Like we often only come when we want things, and we have very specific things that we want. We want God like a genie to serve our needs. And in this story, that's what the mom is doing. And so Jesus is in this tense moment with the mom and the two guys that don't get what the kingdom is all about. And it's good for us to recognize there's often a disparity between what is on our minds and what is on the mind or heart of God. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 says, "For my thoughts," God is speaking, "are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways." So there's a disparity often between God's ways and our ways. They have on their mind the kingdom of Israel. They have on their mind their prominence and positions of power. But Jesus has on his mind not one nation, Jesus has on his mind the nations. Jesus has on his mind a plan of salvation to bring hope to every nation, tribe, and tongue, so that Israel would be lifted up as a light, as the scripture says, to the Gentiles, so that all people would know the heart of God. And aren't you glad that that's what Jesus was focused on? That on his mind was your salvation as he's going up to Jerusalem, but the disciples, on their mind is their position of power and prominence. And isn't this the reality so often in our lives? The thing on our mind, the thing on our heart is so different than what is on the mind or on the heart of God. And we're going to see Jesus reorient their thinking. As they're looking for greatness, he wants to redefine their understanding of greatness. Now watch what he says. He says back to them, "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup that I'm about to drink?" Now when Jesus is saying this, he's not talking about a glass of wine. Jesus is speaking of a cup of suffering that he's going to endure. So he is going to go to the cross, and it's called a cup of suffering. In fact, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's praying, he says to his Father, "Father, if there's any other way for this cup of suffering to pass from me, let it be. But not my will, your will be done." So Jesus says to the disciples, you've overestimated your ability. You've overestimated your ability to endure pain and suffering. You don't know what you're asking for when you ask for the right and left. Indeed, there will be two men at my right and my left, but these two men will be hanging on a cross next to me at my right and my left. So you don't know what you're asking for, Jesus says. Now, these disciples look back and they said, "We can. Yeah, we can do it. That's fine. We can suffer, Jesus. We can handle the cup." And whenever we're asking to be used by God, it's good for us to recognize that request to be used by God comes with a measure of difficulty and pain. This is why so many people stop on their journey of faith, because they want to follow Jesus, but when it gets hard, they turn back. So we ask for God to use our lives, but that request comes with pain. Often we will grow in our leadership in God's kingdom to the threshold of our pain endurance or our pain tolerance. So Jesus says this is what the request means. Now, Jesus then said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they've been prepared by my Father." Now, in verse 25, it says the others hear about this. So the other 10 disciples are listening in as Jesus is responding to James and John and their mom. And they're hearing Jesus unpack this moment with them and their request for thrones next to Jesus. And the other 10, it says they were indignant, which means they were mad. They're really mad with the two brothers. And Jesus called them all together as disciples and said. Now, I want you to notice Jesus in this moment is teaching about his kingdom. He's going to give to them a new, better way of living. He's trying to lay down the tracks of, if you want to be great in my kingdom, if you want to be great in any area of your life, this is the definition of true greatness. So he says this. He calls them together and he says, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles, they lord over others with their power. They lord it over them. And their high officials exercise authority over them." So he's saying in the kingdom of the Romans, what they do with power is they oppress people. And this was historically, you can see this, Romans were very oppressive with the Israelites. So they took their power and they pushed people down. They used their power, their prestige, their positions. They used their position to get other people to serve them. And Jesus says, this is the way it is in the kingdom of the world. This is still the way it is in the kingdom of the world. If you want power, what you often have to do in the world is you got to push over people to get to positions of prominence. But Jesus is going to flip it, and he's going to say, in my kingdom, greatness is not human power that oppresses people. There's a new definition of greatness. He says this in verse 26, and this is the emphasis. I want to encourage you, underline this little phrase in your notes. Jesus says, "Not so with you." I'm building a new tribe. I am building a new group of people that live the better way. So the better way, not so with you, Jesus says. Instead, this is it. Whoever wants to become great. Now, notice Jesus does not chastise them for the desire for greatness. Jesus actually says, whoever wants to be great, if you want greatness, this is the path to greatness. Whoever wants to become great among you must become your what? Your servant. And whoever wants to be first must first be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, this is so countercultural. This is actually upside down the way of the world in the first century and in the 21st century. And Jesus is saying there's a position in society, the lowest place of service, the place where people, all they would do all day long is serve other people. This is the image of what it means to be a leader. This is what it means to be great in my kingdom. He flips upside down their paradigm and says, this is the path to greatness. Now, in the midst of it, he says to them, and the model for all of this is me. He says, the Son of Man, speaking of himself, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's saying, I came so that I could lay down my life on a cross so that you could be forgiven. And that's the image in my kingdom. It's an upside down kind of kingdom where the leaders, the people in my kingdom serve, love, and sacrifice for the good of others. Now, in the few moments that I have remaining, I have one objective, and that's to convince you that God has designed you, has put something inside of you that he wants to unleash to live this kind of way where your life is about service in a way that leads to greatness and deep fulfillment in your life. And I've got just about 17 and a half minutes to convince you of this. So Jesus gives us the way to greatness, and the first truth he gives to us is that if you want to be great, you have to pursue faithful service over high position. So he's saying, if you want greatness in my kingdom, the image is Jesus crucified on a cross for your sins. And there's an invitation for us in the beauty of Jesus' crucifixion to pursue faithful service, not high position. Now, when we live this way, what happens as a result of it is that we get the joy of being used by God. We get the joy of God using our ordinary lives to make a difference here on planet Earth. And there's something that God has placed inside of you that when it gets unleashed through your life, there's a great sense of joy that you begin to experience. I'll tell you about my dad. My dad, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, but he'll turn 68 this fall. And my dad, I've watched him over the course of his life, and in particular, the last 5 to 7 years, I've watched my dad grow tremendously in godliness. And if you were to ask my dad, what is the thing that's really making a difference? And I'm sure he'd point to reading the Bible and praying, but there's another thing that my dad would point to. And he would tell you, a few years ago, he went to this event called Life Relaunch. And at this Life Relaunch, they talked about healing from your inner wounds and your past and the grace of God and how Jesus wants to set you free. And my dad, as he went through that, experienced a tremendous amount of freedom in this journey called Life Relaunch. Now, afterwards, my dad said, you know what? I've been so impacted by this Life Relaunch program that I want God to use my life. So he said to the leader, if you'll use me, I want to be a part of this. So he started serving, and he would do these events. And over the course of the last few years, my dad has done dozens of these events, investing in literally now hundreds of men, seeing freedom come, generational freedom, so much that this last weekend he was serving in inner city Detroit, working with people who've come out of prison and helping them relaunch their lives. And I want you to see a picture. This is my dad this last weekend. He's the one in the second row with the black shirt on, and that might be what I look like when I'm 68 years old. And if my dad were to be here today and tell you, he would tell you in tears that it is one of the greatest joys of his life to be used by God, to see men set free from their past, to see generations changed. See, sometimes in our life, we end up living miserable lives because we're so focused on ourselves. But what the Proverbs says in Proverbs 11:25, he who refreshes others, he who pours out his life, the person that refreshes others will themselves be refreshed. It's like you walk around with a little watering can, and every time you pour that out onto the life of somebody else, you're actually refreshing and watering yourself. And I think that you could also say people who don't refresh others are miserable themselves. And we all know somebody like that. This is not a good time to make eye contact with that person. But we all know somebody that they're just miserable because it's all about them. It's me, my. And it's true that so often this is the reality of what we come into the world with. Like when you're a baby, nobody has to teach a baby to be self-centered. Like a baby comes into the world and we believe with our whole heart children are a great blessing from God. But for the first few years, they really don't contribute much. I mean, they mess their diapers, they need to be fed, they're up in the middle of the night, and then they smile at you. And there's so much delight and joy in that smile. But once they're 17, 15, and 10, if they're not contributing, yes, there's still delight, but if they're not contributing, there's something wrong in the maturation journey. And there are a lot of people who have been followers for Jesus for 40 years, and they don't have 40 years of experience following Jesus. They have 1 year repeated 40 times. Over and over and over again. The same story, the same challenges, the same issues. So the invitation is to get out of that and step into a deeper relationship with God, to step into greater maturity. So the moment that you say, I'm gonna serve, the moment that you say, I'm gonna let God use my life to make a difference in the lives of others, what happens is that's when we take the bib off. That's when we pull the diaper off and get real pants on. That's when we step up and grow and we say, I want to let God use my life to serve. Now, it's important to also recognize that faithful service does not mean frustrated service. So you don't have to be miserable when you're serving. In fact, I would say serving is a great joy when you do it according to God's design for your life. And God wants to unleash what He's placed inside of you, and when you serve according to the shape that God has given to you, there's so much joy in the midst of it. Now, I want you to see this little acronym that if you've been a part of Saddleback for a long time, you know this and you might want to write it down. You have a shape that God has given to you that includes 5 things. 1, your spiritual gifts. 2, your heart and passion. 3, your unique abilities. Some of you can build things, and I have a hard time distinguishing between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. So there's some of you have that ability. Others of you have personality, your personality, extrovert, introvert, all of that. And then experiences. So God will use your shape to make a difference on planet Earth. And there is a great joy in the moment that you understand your shape, that you understand how God made you and designed you to make a difference. Now, one step that I'm praying for and asking you to take this week for your good is to discover your shape, to understand how God made you and designed you. In fact, we put together this little journey called Activate, and Activate, what we do is we help you understand how God's made you. So we have coming up in just a couple of weeks at all of our campuses what we call Step 3 of Activate. And Step 3 of Activate is launching. It's a refreshed version of 301 if you've been around for a while. And in that journey, what we want to do is we want to help you unleash the gifts that God has placed inside of you. It's a reception where we sit down, we walk through these 5 categories, we give you tools to process, we help you get linked up with an area of ministry, and we unleash you with God's grace into your area of service. And I want to invite you to be a part of this Activate journey. Now, some of you said, well, I haven't taken Step 1 or Step 2. I'm giving you permission. Don't tell anybody that I did, but I'm giving you permission to skip 1 and 2 for now and go straight to 3. That's great. come on in and let us help you. Now, some of you, you've gone through, you know your shape. But maybe this is a moment for you to bring a friend or a family member to discover their spiritual gifts, their heart passion, and this is happening in just a couple weeks. So here's what I want to invite you to do. If you will text ACTIVATE to 83,000 right now in this moment, go ahead and do it. I know you're not surfing the internet. Just pull your phone out for a quick second and text ACTIVATE to 83,000. That will put the link there on your phone so that you can get the specific information at your campus. You can also do this on the app if you have that through the program. But I want to encourage you, if you will, just text ACTIVATE so that you can get that link to join me in a couple of weeks as we go through Activate Step 3 together. It's going to be such a great moment because there are countless people at Saddleback that you know who've experienced the joy of being used by God with the spiritual gifts that He's placed inside of them. And they would tell you that when they let God use their life, it changed them. Some of them that would tell you would be the student workers at our Santa Rosa campus in the Philippines. They have been growing like crazy there. They're seeing people come to faith. The campus is busting at the seams. And they just built a new student room in their building on this first floor. So they got 2 floors in this building. I want you to see the picture of this campus. This is the before and this is the after. And on the bottom is all the student workers at our Santa Rosa campus. Now I want you to see their faces. And I want you to see the joy in the faces of these people as they're serving and they're using their gifts. And there are countless people like this in the Saddleback story that have invested their life. I think it's awesome to celebrate what God is doing in that campus. There's so many places where God wants to unleash your gifts. I'm going to talk about them in just a moment, but I want to emphasize this second point that in order to experience true greatness in God's kingdom, what we need is to esteem God's favor over people's applause. There's something that shifts in our mindset when we live for the applause, the voice of one, and that's the voice of our Heavenly Father. Paul would say in Colossians 3, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ that you are serving. So every time you roll up your sleeves, every time you pick up the towel, every time you serve, you, at the end of the day, the one that you are serving is Jesus, the one who first served you. And the invitation is not for recognition. It's not for esteem. It's not for the applause of men. It's the freedom that comes when we say, God, I want you to use my life to bless you. I want to serve in a way that you see and you're pleased with my life. And what happens is we experience freedom from self-promotion. A lot of people in our culture are in bondage to self-promotion. I want you to know when you stand before the living God, He will not ask you how many Instagram followers you had. He will not ask you how many likes you got for your lunch that you posted on social media. When you stand before the living God, He's going to ask, what did you do with the gifts that I placed inside of you? I love the story of Jim and Marcia Reedy. They've been a part of Saddleback for a long period of time, but they started serving with Saddleback kids. They've been serving for 28 years. I want you to see they did a party recently to celebrate them for 28 years of faithful service. And they've been working with kindergartners for 28 years. And you could imagine how many moments they would go home exhausted on a weekend pouring out their life, but they saw what God was doing. They saw lives transformed. In fact, they're raising up the next generation of SKs, Saddleback Kid workers, and they're passing the baton now to a girl by the name of Cassidy and a girl by the name of Sammy, and they're stepping in. And at one point, they were kindergartners in Saddleback Kids. And as a result of their faithful service, now another generation is being impacted. Countless numbers of people in our story as a church family that have served and poured out their lives. And some of you have yet to experience the joy of being used by God through your gifts of service to those around you. Now, I want you to see this long list, and it's not exhaustive, but this long list of ways that you can make a difference. And this is mostly to open your eyes to realize that there is a place for you in our church family. Saddleback Kids, prayer, office administration, the hub, weekend experience, hospitality, filmmaking, greeters, production, parking, small group hosts, ushers, worship, bookstore, social media, Saddleback students, celebrate recovery, translation, counseling, photography, security, men's and women's ministry, Peace Center, Activate, graphic design, tutoring, career coaching, volunteer central, financial coaching, retreat ministry, writing, and mission trips. That's a lot of opportunities to use your gifts to make a difference. And at Activate, you're going to hear more about these opportunities and be matched. Take your gifts and match them with an area of ministry where you'll find deep fulfillment, deep joy, letting God use your life. Now, I'll also say this, because sometimes pastors, when they preach about serving, are notorious for focusing on serving at the church. And rightfully so. We should if we're pastors. But at the same time, there's more than that. See, the joy of serving is not just what you do in the walls of a church building. The joy of serving is unleashed beyond the walls of the church building. And what God wants for us is for us to be the kind of people that serve wherever we go. And could you imagine the kind of impact that you would have on your company if every day you went in and you were serving the people around you wholeheartedly? Like, imagine the difference between the kind of person at your work, which I know is not you, not people from Saddleback, but the person that complains every day, all day, and the other person that they serve with a grateful heart, and they just roll up their sleeves and make a difference. Now, here are some other ways just to expand your mind as to how you can serve at work, at home, and at play. Some of you might say, ow, when you hear some of these, and I just want to look at some of them. Writing an encouraging note to someone. Somebody said, I'm not an encourager. I don't encourage people. Well, there's an invitation right there. Help your spouse with the kids. Help around the house with a good attitude. Bring your coworker coffee. Mow your neighbor's yard. Help someone learn a second language. Care for a veteran. Fill up the gas tank of your spouse. Visit a nursing home. Bring your neighbor's dinner or dessert. It was a Freudian slip, I just said. Dessert. Visit a prison. Grocery shop for the elderly. Tutor a struggling student. Help a neighbor with a home repair. Do car maintenance for a single mom. Babysit for a friend. Coach a kid's sports team. Mentor a young adult. There are so many ways that our service can be unleashed into the community around us. And our deep prayer as a church family is that every community where there's a local expression of Saddleback, it would be different because the people of our church family serve those around them. We've been talking for months about the importance of having one life that we're praying to know the love of Jesus. And could you imagine if that were the primary strategy or way that we would employ with our one life, that we would just serve them, love them, care for them, do things that would show them with acts of kindness how much we've been changed by the love of Jesus to love those around us. There's a plethora of ways. There are so many ways that we could make a difference through serving. Now, here's one thing that I've noticed. Whenever there's an idea to serve somebody else that pops into my mind, it is not Satan speaking to me. Some of you might be like, how do I know if it's God? Well, I'm certain that Satan would not tell you to creatively serve and love somebody around you, okay? His kingdom is a kingdom of destruction. So you can assume that if there is something that pops into your mind that is an act of service to love somebody around you, God is a God of love. The Holy Spirit wants to empower you and I to live this way. So if it's there, just assume it's there from God. It's not Satan. You could just say, get behind me, Satan. I receive, Lord, what you say by faith, and I'm going to serve those around me and do it to please him. Now, there's one final area that I want to finish with, and it's this. It's to surrender the expectation of an easy life. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why we don't serve. There's some of you, maybe you wrote yourself off because of your past. Maybe some of you've said, I don't have the gifts. I have so much that in my life that's broken, I can't serve. But if we're honest, one of the things that often stands in the way for us is that we just don't want to be inconvenienced. We like our comfort. We like our lives to be pleasurable. So we pursue things that make our life easier. And we do this with technology. We have food courts where you can go and everybody in the family can get what they want to eat. But one of the things that I've noticed about our effort to make our lives easier and more convenient is that so often at the end of that is greater levels of misery. And I know this personally because there are moments where we go to a food court to try to pick one place for the family to eat. Nobody can agree. I'm open to pay for whoever wants to eat with us. And everybody is fighting miserable because there are so many options that are right at their fingertips. This is true in life. The pursuit of an easy life will make you miserable. If you're constantly trying to make your life, your marriage, your relationships with your kids, your work easier, you'll be miserable. So Jesus invites us into a laying down of our lives that involves a lot of pain and difficulty. The invitation to wholeheartedly follow Jesus is an invitation to come and die. It's to come and give your life to the one who gave his life for you. And the only reason that this would make sense is if he truly did give his life for your freedom. See, when we live this way, we live with a kind of peace in the midst of pain in this broken world. Jesus would actually say to his disciples about peace in the midst of pain, he would make a profound statement. And he would say this, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And God wants to give you peace deep within your soul. Sometimes we lack peace because we go from thing to thing, hoping something will deeply satisfy our soul. We go from job to job, go from marriage to marriage, house to house, car to car, vacation to vacation, and we're still frustrated. We're still empty. It's not until we wholeheartedly embrace a life of true service that true freedom, true peace, true joy comes into our life. And this is not an obligation, guilt, twist your arm into service kind of a sermon. This is a wholehearted invitation into the greatest kind of fulfillment and joy that you have ever experienced with your life. It's a life that is free because it's serving those around you because you've been served by the Most High God through the death of Jesus on a cross and his resurrection. And I'm inviting you today into this. And the reality that all of us have to face is our days on this earth are limited. Now, all of us at some point will meet our expiration date and we'll stand before the living God. And the question one will be, what did we do with the message of Jesus? The fact that Jesus died on a cross for our sins, he rose again from the dead and offers us forgiveness, that by faith through grace, we can receive God's forgiveness into our life. That's the first question. But the second question is a question of stewardship and service. What did you do with the gifts and the talents and the time that I gave to you? And there's a joy that comes at the end of this life if we've been faithful with the life that God gave to us. You know, when Stacy and I came here 2 years ago, there's a precious couple by the name of Greg and Betty Hopkins that so beautifully loved our family when we came here. Greg was a part of our prayer team, and every Sunday before I'd come out, Greg would pray with a group of us, and the last words that Greg spoke to me before the end of his life that we had a conversation, he said, Pastor, your shirts are too small. You probably need to get some bigger shirts. Either your arms are growing or the shirts are shrinking. And that was his last words. And he would always say, right before I'd preach, he'd say, give him heaven, Pastor, give him heaven. And for 20 years, Greg and Betty served faithfully here at the hub. They would go on mission trips. And in June of 2023, Greg went home to be with the Lord. And afterwards, Betty, she remained faithful in her journey of following Jesus wholeheartedly through great pain and grief. And you could see in her face joy as she carried the grief. There was this light about Betty. Wherever she would go, you would see in her, you would see this great joy. She would bless people. She would serve. She would love. And one of the great delights of Betty's life is that she would go on mission trips. She would lead mission trips to Ghana. And she took 7 trips in total to Ghana, ministering to people in Ghana. Now, Betty, right before she went on her last mission trip, she was commissioned as a pastor of Saddleback Church. And I want you to see a picture of her on this mission trip just several weeks ago. Betty is the one on the left, and you can see the joy in her. When she was in Ghana, she went into these witch camps and delivered Bibles. And those who were on the trip just said she was in heaven on earth as she was serving in Ghana, just laying down her life for these people that she so deeply loves out of a heart of service. There was so much joy. And on the 7th trip, as Betty would come home this past Sunday night a week ago, she'd come home, she'd kind of get stuff back in order. And on Tuesday morning, Betty went home to be with the Lord. She passed from this life to the next. And this faithful servant that would sit over here to my right every week, that would pray, that would pour out her life, this faithful servant stood before God Almighty this week. And I just imagine when she came home, the angel said, "Pastor Betty, welcome home." And I imagine, there's so much grief, and for friends and family that so deeply loved her, so much grief. And at the same time, there's a kind of peace knowing that she's getting her reward. She heard from the Most High God. She heard from her King. Well done, good and faithful servant. And we honor her as a church family. There's a special prize in heaven for all these countless faceless people, some that that have just laid down their life, and so many that have just poured out over and over and over again. There's a special reward. And when you stand before the living God, I so badly want for you and for myself, I so badly want to hear those words from God. Well done, good and faithful servant. I don't want to stand before him and hear, "Oh, Andy, I had so much more for you, but your eyes were on you." I want to hear from him, "Andy, I used your life. I used your life powerfully, and you laid it down, and you got to see what only I could do." That's the invitation. It's an invitation to joy and delight and being used by God, and the freedom of needing to get the applause of people, that at the end of the day, there's a kind of service that you just roll up your sleeves and your commendation is coming. Your applause is coming from God. Now, I'll say this one more time as I wrap up my message. Our image of service is not one of duty. It's not obligation. It's an invitation. You're free. You could leave. You could go home, never serve. I'll still love you. I'll still care about you. But you will miss out on the ride of a lifetime that you are invited into. And that image is into the most beautiful image of the Son of Man who would lay down his life for you. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul would say, your attitude should be that as of Christ Jesus, who being the very nature of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but rather he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to death, even to death on a cross. Therefore, God the Father exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue confess, in heaven and on earth, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That's the invitation, to look into the eyes of the one who loves you more than you can comprehend, more than you will ever be able to fathom. The creator of the universe loves you. He likes you. He made you to know his heart, and he invites you into this great family business that as followers of Jesus, we get to be a part of loving and serving and pouring out our lives in the life of the church and beyond the walls of the church building to make a difference. You today can take that step to discover your shape, to help somebody else discover their shape and say yes to get engaged in a life of service. You can do it today by signing up to be a part of Activate. You can do that. Just text Activate to 83,000. We'll send you that link and you can sign up. But before we conclude and go into a time of song, I just want to pause for a moment and give us the opportunity to let this truth set into our hearts and respond to the work of God. So I want to invite you to bow your heads for a moment. And perhaps in this moment, the thing that you might say to God is, God, thank you. Thank you for serving me. So unfathomable to our minds that the creator and the sustainer of the universe would serve us. Jesus, thank you. Thank you that you laid down your life for us. And you invite us into the better way, the way to true greatness. There's nobody greater than you, Jesus. There's no name above your name. We adore you. You're beautiful. You're majestic and holy. And I thank you for the cross today. I thank you for forgiveness and mercy that every one of us listening to my voice, we don't deserve your mercy, yet you stepped in and you're changing our story. Some of you today, as you're considering, you've never opened your heart to God. You can do that. That question of salvation, you can open your heart to him right now. May pray a prayer simply that just say, oh, Jesus, I need you. I need you. I surrender to you in this moment. I want to follow you. And in this moment, he's stepping in. Others of you right now, perhaps you would say to God, you're a follower of Jesus, but you've never crossed that line to say, I'm going to let my life be about others, not about me. You would just say to him, oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry in my heart that it's been about me. And I want it to be about you, and I want it to be about others. And so in the quietness of this moment, I'm surrendering to your invitation to be a servant so that I can love and care for the people that are on your heart around me. Help me serve, Jesus. Help me love in action because you loved me first. God, bless these things. Bless these truths and let them change our life. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.